Keep yourself in the loop of everything football on the Golden State Media Concepts Football Podcast. The latest news on and off the field, be it college football, Big Ten, SEC, Big 12, Pac-12, ACC to the NFL. We've got you covered. Listen to the Golden State Media Concepts Football Podcast.
Thank you for tuning in to the GSMC Football Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Podcast Network. I'm your host, Kendrick. Hello, everybody. Hope you're all having a fantastic day. 2 weeks. 2 weeks, a week and a half, something like that, until football is back, until the Chiefs versus the Texans. Obviously, I talked about that in my last podcast. I am so excited. I am beyond excited. Every single day, we're just getting closer and closer to time for football. I cannot wait to see Mahomes and Watson out there. It's going to be so much fun. I can't wait to just be able to just sit back, kick my feet up, and just watch some good football. Because it wasn't too long ago. I remember back in April, when everything really started to close down, when I had to leave my campus, when I had to do everything. I remember sitting back and I was thinking to myself, is there going to be football? Like what is gonna happen? Am I gonna be stuck? Is this year just gonna be the year of no sports? Like, what is this gonna look like? And obviously, though, the NBA, they've been able to come out, have their season. Baseball's been having their season. All the sports have somewhat been able to come back, and I think it's gonna be really interesting with the Chiefs, of course, because they are actually going to have fans in the stadium. Anyways, a little bit about me, though, before we get into any of the football topics. I did go out to a park recently with a friend. It was the first time that I've actually gone to a park since this pandemic started. I did go to the beach with my family for a day. We spent a couple hours there, but other than that, I haven't really gone out and attempted to get any kind of normalcy back in my life. My routine has been based around my home, but I asked a friend if she wanted to hang out with me. We went to a park that I hadn't been to before, but she had, so she kind of showed me around. Went for a swim. I don't remember the last time I had even gone for a swim. Went on the swing set, just goofed around, walked around the trail, went to the dog park, even though we didn't have a dog. We just kind of looked at other dogs while we were there. Kind of weird, I know. But overall, it was a really good day, and it was nice to just kind of get out of the house. With all the chaos and everything on social media, I'm still really trying to take a social media break at the moment, because it's just every single day it is doom and gloom, and there's something else dumb being said by somebody that just spewing out false information about something, and there's another death somewhere, and it's just a lot to handle. It really is. It's a lot to handle. It's a lot to take in. It's a lot of sadness, and I've just had to do my best to decompress myself. But anyways, we do have quite a bit to talk about today. I want to talk about Joe Burrow. I mentioned this in my last podcast. I want to dive a bit deeper into Joe Burrow. I want to get into Jordan Love, because apparently he is struggling, to put it one way, with the Packers at practice. I want to get into Pete Carroll. He made some very, very nice comments when talking about race relations, politics, Black Lives Matter, all that stuff. But I want to challenge Pete on something. And then my last topic of the day, I think that the Jaguars are doing the NFL version of tanking. And I don't think it's going to go the way that they want it to. But anyways, let's go ahead and get to the first segment. So, when you are a college quarterback and you're going into the NFL, and you're drafted specifically like number 1 overall, number 2 overall, you're a first round pick in general, and you are projected to be this team's starter, you have to have a few characteristics about you when you get into this role. Number 1, you need to have maturity. You can look at certain quarterbacks in NFL history that did not have the maturity. Johnny Manziel did not have the maturity. You could look at Ryan Leaf. Did not have the maturity. Couldn't really handle the position. You have to be able to take scrutiny. You have to be able to carry yourself with a professionalism. You can't be too full of yourself. They always say this league has a way of humbling even the cockiest of people. And if you try and stay cocky, this league will devour you. You gotta be coachable. You gotta be able to handle criticism and scrutiny. You gotta be able to get along with your teammates. You do, for the most part, have to always say the right thing. And there's certain quarterbacks throughout history that have had certain issues with these kinds of things. And certain quarterbacks have flamed out very, very quickly because they couldn't fit into these molds. And while there's always some guy somewhere who breaks a mold, there's always that one dude who does it. Always. In every walk of life. There's that one receiver that's a bit quiet. Julio Jones. Most people, they think wide receivers are divas. Julio Jones, nobody would ever say Julio Jones is a diva. And I think anyone who did say he's a diva, they clearly don't watch football. Because Julio Jones is a silent assassin. Literally doesn't say anything to anybody, doesn't ever really seem to dress flashy. He just goes out there and he works. You look at, for a long time, they talked about how black people couldn't be quarterbacks because they just weren't smart enough until there was the first black quarterback. And then until there was the first black quarterback to win a Super Bowl. And then there was the second. And then the third. And so on and so forth. And now you look at the biggest stars right now in the sports. Russell Wilson, Patrick Mahomes, Lamar Jackson. They are all black quarterbacks. And they dominate the sport. There's always going to be somebody who breaks the mold. But I guess when it comes to the personality thing, just think about some of these quarterbacks. Jay Cutler. He was seen as rigid, didn't seem to get along with teammates that great, but he had a hell of a lot of talent. He parlayed it into, a 10-year career, a little bit over 10 years. I don't remember exactly how long, Jay Cutler got drafted in 2006. I think he retired 2 years ago, was it? 2 years ago? Cause I know he retired and he came out of retirement. But he had a pretty decent career. He put up some numbers, but he never really won anything. And Jay Cutler's legacy is kind of a guy who probably had one of the greatest arms in NFL history, but dude just didn't seem to love football enough, and he just didn't get along with his teammates. Jeff George, another guy, a lot of arm talent, one of the strongest arms ever, didn't really get along with his teammates. You look at the guy like Johnny Manziel. Was a star in college. He was the face of not only Texas A&M, but of college football. Obviously was first round pick of the Browns, goes into the sport, but the thing is, he was still too immature. He was busy partying, he didn't take it seriously enough, and ultimately, he flamed out of the NFL to the point where he couldn't even get back on a roster. No team would even touch him. And he had his own off-the-field issues, but some of that just ties into not only addiction, but some of it also does tie into the maturity of the individual. And while I do believe that everybody, if you are addicted to something, I believe everyone should be able should have the ability or the access to get help. He went ahead and he did get his help, but I think at this point in time, the NFL just kind of moved on from him. Another player in the NFL right now who is kind of dealing with some of these things is Baker Mayfield. Remember, Baker Mayfield, he came into the NFL with a bit of a rap sheet in college. He had the police video, he was grabbing his junk on the sideline at the other team, and while I don't have a problem with it really, because I like seeing that, I like seeing that kind of personality. I like seeing some cockiness, I like seeing some in-your-face brashness. I think it's kind of funny, but I do understand the people out there who think it's tasteless, the people out there who do say it's immature, because yes, it is immature. When you combine some immaturity with competitiveness, you might do some obscene gestures. I didn't have too big of a problem with it, but I know there are people out there who just think that is a red flag because it does point to the maturity. And obviously that kind of did show itself in Baker this past season, criticizing his medical staff. His way of bulking up in the off season was to eat more. He didn't work out as much as he typically did because he said he was a bit banged up. And then he goes into the season, obviously again criticizing his medical staff. He criticized Duke Johnson because he wanted to go to another team where he'd have a bigger role. He was criticizing Greg Williams, former obviously interim head coach of the team. He just kind of ran his mouth a bit too much, and it rubbed a lot of people the wrong way because while he was running his mouth, he was throwing as many interceptions as he did touchdowns, and everyone believes that the Browns severely underachieved this past season given the talent on their team. And I can't say that they're wrong. I really can't. I love Baker, and I want to see him work. I want to see somebody like this break the mold, because who was his comp? in college. Who did people think this guy was going to be in the NFL? Johnny Manziel. And they pointed to his personality. And even though I think that he's already shown to be a better quarterback in the NFL and a better quarterback overall than Johnny Manziel ever dreamed of being, especially just as a raw passer, not the athlete, but as a raw passer, I do believe he has shown that. But, I mean, if after the season, right, I've talked about this. This is a new coaching staff, new everything. They have no tie to Baker. If Baker doesn't shape up, if he doesn't grow up, I think they can move on from him. If he looks like he did last year, no way in hell he makes it through the season as a starter, and no way in hell is his job secure or his position with the team secure going into next year. But there's a young quarterback in the NFL right now, a rookie, who was already, day number 1, going to be the starter of his team. He was drafted basically knowing he was going to be the starter, and I think that given this team in its history, most people would say that there's a lot of pressure. You're going to collapse. Can you handle it? Because some people have brought up with Baker. He went to the Browns. You're asking an immature quarterback to try and be the savior of, maybe you could say, an immature franchise. The Browns, they never seem to give any head coach enough time. They never give him enough time to bring in a culture. They never give him enough time to really put their imprint on the team. They seem to always want immediate success. Joe Burrow is going to the Bengals. The Bengals at one point were called the Bungles. That was their nickname because they were awful. And you look even during their Carson Palmer years, not good. During their first few years with Andy Dalton, they were, averaging over the first 5 or 6 years, they were averaging about 10 wins a season. The thing is, they couldn't win a playoff game. And even then, there's always they would sign in players that had troubled past, that had in college or in the NFL, whether it be Pac-Man Jones or Vontaze Burfict. There was always some kind of character. Obviously, recently they drafted Joe Mixon. That was a whole thing. But of course, Joe Mixon, he's been a model citizen since coming into the NFL, got a big contract extension with the Bengals. I'm happy for him. I'm glad he turned his life around. I'm glad he's been on the straight and narrow, and let's just hope it stays that way. But one of the reasons why I said that Joe Burrow I thought was going to struggle is because there's a lack of talent on the Bengals. They're not that great. They've got some pieces here and there, but all in all, they just simply aren't that great. Their offensive line is a mess. I like Tyler Boyd and AJ Green. I do like Joe Mixon. But other than that, that's kind of it. That really is kind of it. And the offensive line being as bad as it is, Joe Burrow, he isn't Lamar Jackson when it comes to mobility. He can move kind of like a Tony Romo. So, he's mobile enough, I guess, to evade. But I think he's going to get killed, especially because of the division he's in. He's being asked to uplift a franchise that historically has been, let's be honest, hot garbage with a second-year head coach who we are all trying to see if he can even coach. We have no idea what Zach Taylor is. And he's going in there as a raw rookie with a limited training camp, limited practices, no preseason. I don't think they're doing I don't think teams are getting together and doing scrimmages with each other. I don't think any of that is happening. So he is going into the season with a major disadvantage, but I think Joe Burrow can handle this. I think Joe Burrow has the maturity and has the confidence in himself to be able to handle this. And here is why I say that. Joe Burrow, and I think I brought up this tweet in my last podcast, Joe Burrow took to Twitter on the 27th of August, and he tweeted out and said, "How can you hear the pain black people are going through and dismiss it as nothing? How can you hear the pain and respond with anything other than, I stand with you?" Now, obviously, he's talking about Black Lives Matter, talking about police brutality. Joe Burrow, even when he was in college, talked about how he understood it going into the draft process. He didn't shy away. He didn't shy away from any of the questions. He's answered the question anytime. And even when it comes to this tweet, it was unprompted. No one asked him a question about it. No one said he should tweet it. That was his own thought at that particular moment, and he posted it. And that is kind of the beauty of social media, that these athletes do have the ability to just comment on things, and there's those out there, and this more has to deal with when it fits their narrative, right? There's those out there who read Joe Burrow's tweets, and they see his post about this, and I read some of the replies to it. There's those out there who say, oh, it's a hoax, oh, because it's overblown, oh, don't talk about sports, Joe, I don't want my politics in my sports, I don't want the two to mix. But Joe Burrow still takes the position that he does, and he doesn't mince his words, he doesn't leave anything up to interpretation, he takes a stance, and that's what it is. And I think that says a lot, because there's quarterbacks out there older than him who still, to this day, take very PC routes. A couple of years ago, Tom Brady was asked about protesting during the national anthem. And Tom Brady said that he wasn't too familiar with it. He wasn't really aware of it. Didn't really think about it. He took a very PC approach to it. And I mean, I understand why he did it. He didn't want to say whether he was for or against it. Sometimes you're damned if you do, damned if you don't. But at this point in time, to be in the middle of an issue doesn't really fly with most people. Nowadays, you are either on the left or you're on the right. To be in the center for most people means well, nothing good. I guess we'll just leave it at that. It means nothing good. But Joe Burrow, he hasn't really taken the middle route. He has said exactly how he feels. But this isn't the only reason why I think that he can handle the mess that is the Bengals and handle the mess that is most likely going to be this 2020 season. I've even seen, the Bengals schedule is not difficult. It is not a very, very difficult schedule. It's not the easiest in the world, but it's not, I don't think it was top 10. But I still think he's just going to struggle, given the lack of talent, given the lack of everything. But I think if you just go back to Joe Burrow's college career, redshirted his freshman year, didn't really play his other 2 years at Ohio State, threw some passes here and there, but didn't really do a whole lot, goes to LSU, his first year there, it was a season, he didn't play every single game, but it was just kind of a season. Last year was his first full season as a starter. And it was the best statistical season in college football history, given the opponents he beat, how he performed, everything, his efficiency, the yards per attempt, the touchdown to interception ratio. He was just sensational. And then you see what he did in the college football playoffs. He dismantled Clemson in the first half. The game was over. Watching the game, I felt like the game was over after about, at halftime I said, okay, yeah. No, LSU's gonna win this. It's over. There's no chance. It was crazy what he did. And all Joe Burrow knows, you can just look at that and say, all he knows is work. And that was something people thought was gonna benefit Baker Mayfield, because he was a 2-time walk-on, won the Heisman. All Baker knows is work. All he knows is how to work hard. Cause he had to work hard. He wasn't getting the scholarship offers. He had to go walk on and prove himself and beat out dudes that they gave scholarships to. That's kind of the thought process, I think, with Joe Burrow. You'd think he had a very, not traditional path when it came to college. You would think you can maybe translate some of that into the NFL. Translate that work ethic. Because now, dude, you gotta work even harder. The competition only got better. And while you are being handed the starting job, mainly because the Bengals have nothing else to attract fans to their games, you're being handed the starting job on a silver platter, and it's literally his to lose. It is only his to lose. He has no competition. And while I have said I think that he's at a bit of a disadvantage, he is not in Tua's shoes where he can watch Ryan Fitzpatrick. He's not in Jordan Love's shoes where he can watch Aaron Rodgers. He wasn't in Patrick Mahomes' shoes. He wasn't in Aaron Rodgers' shoes when it came to him watching Brett Favre. He is going out there to play. And all the projections for him have the Bengals not looking that great. Obviously, I talked about ESPN. They have him at like 6-10. I thought that was wrong, and it didn't make any sense to me. I think the Bengals are still going to be bad. But I do not believe this is going to eat Burrow up, right? I don't think that because he's not playing well, I don't think his confidence is going to shake. I don't think he's not going to believe in himself. I think he knows kind of the situation he's been put in, and he knows he just has to make the best of it. He was the number 1 overall pick. This is your dream. And I think that he has shown the ability to handle criticism He's shown the ability to battle back in the face of adversity. He takes stances. So clearly he is confident in himself. He knows who he is. And if you don't like it, that's your problem. I'm rooting for Burrow. I really am. I still don't think this season's going to look good. I would not be surprised if the Bengals had another top 5, top 3 pick for this coming draft. But I'm looking forward to seeing what Burrow does. I think in his first 3 games, he's going to get killed. He faces the Chargers defense. Even though they lost Derwin James, they still got that pass rush, still got that tough secondary even without him. So I think he's going to struggle in that sense. Then he faces the Browns. I think again, he's going to get whomped. He then faces the Eagles. Maybe while the Eagles offense might struggle a bit because of they're losing offensive lineman after offensive lineman. I still think Burrow will get killed by their defense. And then they get maybe an easy game against the Jaguars. And I'm going to talk about that a bit later, because my God, have the Jaguars. My position has changed on the Jaguars. I now think I understand what people were saying about them. But overall, I've been very impressed with Joe Burrow. I love the kid's confidence. Even during the draft process, people were asking him, would he maybe want to demand a trade out of Cincinnati? Does he want to play there? And the dude said, I will play for whoever drafts me. And that is what most players say. But hey, Eli didn't want to go. He didn't want to go and play with the Chargers. There have been other quarterbacks in history that have done the same thing. Elway, other players at different positions. I think LaDainian Tomlinson. I think he didn't want to go play for Seattle. Players, they have exercised their muscle. They've exercised their power before in the draft. And while Joe Burrow had every chance to, he didn't. And I think that says a lot about him. Anyways, coming up next, speaking of another rookie, we're going to talk some Jordan Love. Apparently Jordan Love is struggling in Green Bay's practices, and I'm going to talk about why that is concerning to me and why that should really concern Green Bay and their fans. That coming up next.
Listen up, sports bettors. This is Bryson Ethan here to tell you about our favorite sports book, and that's BetUS. Football, basketball, and baseball are all back. And that means it's time to get down your bets. We only endorse one sports book, and that is BetUS.com. Why, you ask? BetUS is the pioneer in online betting with more than 25 years in the biz. You need a sports book with integrity and longevity, and you need to know that you're going to get paid.
That's right, Bryce. You need a sports book that offers everything, including live betting, MMA, golf, horses, esports, entertainment, and all kinds of crazy prop bets and futures. So call today at 1-800-MY-BET-US. That's 1-800-MY-BET-US, and they will walk you through getting started. Nobody in the industry gives better bonuses or bigger bonuses than BetUS. Join now, mention GSMC, and you get up to 150% in bonuses on your first deposit. Nobody beats that. We bet at BetUS, and so should you. So join BetUS today. That's BetUS.com, or call 1-800-MY-BET-US, mention GSMC, and get 150% in bonuses on your first deposit.
Are you looking for help for your fantasy football team? Check out the GSMC Fantasy Football Podcast. Get today's best advice on who to start, who to sit, even who you should draft. From sleeper picks to red hot lineups, they got it all covered for you. That's GSMCpodcast.com/fantasy-football-podcast. We'll cover traditional leagues, dynasty, PPR, even IDP leagues. When you need fantasy help, there's just one show to hit up. Don't forget to like them on Facebook and follow them on Twitter. Visit GSMCpodcast.com for more info.
Welcome back to the GSMC Football Podcast. Last segment talked about Joe Burrow and the Bengals, how I think that his maturity that he has displayed kind of off the field, how I believe that will impact him on the field, and how I believe that he will be able to handle the tumultuous season that will be 2020 and the tumultuous franchise that is the Cincinnati Bengals. The Bengals do not have some great history. They do not have a great history when it comes to their culture, when it comes to their practices as a team. They're historically cheap. And there's a lot of people out there who would say this would probably eat Joe Burrow alive. Just as the Browns, there's people out there who said the Browns will eat Baker Mayfield alive. And there's people out there who believe that so far, that's been proven right, and that the Browns have kind of eaten Baker Mayfield alive. I'm not ready to jump off that boat yet. I like Stefanski. I think Stefanski can do some things with him. But I have acknowledged, if it doesn't go that way for Baker, he'll probably be out of there. He probably won't be the starter anymore. He'll probably have to actually fight for his job this coming season. But when it comes to Joe Burrow, I think that what he experienced in college, his experience when it comes to his upbringing, his ability to speak out on social issues and take a firm stance, I think he's secure in himself. I think he's confident in himself. I think all he knows is hard work, and I think that will benefit him when it comes to this coming season and when it comes to the team that he was drafted on. But speaking of another rookie quarterback that is most likely not going to be scheduled to play this season, but is probably going to be looking to play either this coming season or the following season, Jordan Love. There's a headline on the Packers Wire in this article. Here is the very first section of the article. Green Bay Packers rookie quarterback Jordan Love has meandered through 10 mostly unspectacular practices to start his first NFL training camp. Now, this article was kind of collabed on with two different beat reporters' reports. You have Matt Schneidman, I believe that's how you pronounce his name, who's a Packers beat reporter, and you have Rob Demovsky, who's another beat reporter for the Packers, works with ESPN. I don't remember where Matt Schneidman works. Again, if I'm butchering his last name, I apologize. But Schneidman, he has a quote, and I thought this was interesting. He says, and I quote, "Love has yet to even provide a glimpse at why the Packers traded up to draft him in the first round." Rob Demovsky, he was quoted in saying that he's going through a slow-moving transition to the NFL. Now, the slow-moving transition to the NFL, that can sometimes be expected of players. Not every college football player knows instantly how to translate to the NFL. A lot of players will instantly tell you the biggest difference is that the game is faster. Linebackers are quicker, defensive tackles are quicker. There are these running backs who are used to outrunning defensive tackles. They get to the NFL, they're fighting their hardest to stay ahead of them. Because players are just better. They're quicker, faster, stronger. They react quicker. Everything in the NFL. The NFL does not get easier for people. I have yet to see, and maybe I just don't remember a quote off the top of my head. I have yet to see anybody say the NFL got easier. I think the only time I've seen someone say that they went to like the top league and it got easier, I think was Luka Doncic in the NBA, because he was playing obviously overseas, playing in his own home country, and he was playing against grown men. It's a lot more physical of a league. In the NBA, it's a lot softer, I guess you could say. And he said that it was honestly easier to score in America than it was back home for him. So, I mean, I guess that says something, but that's the only situation in which I can say I've ever seen someone say going to the top league was easier. In the NFL, oh, no. And if you said that, you'd probably get smacked by a teammate. The game's difficult. And so I'm not really surprised he has a slow-moving transition, but it is Schneidman's quote, him saying that he has yet to even provide a glimpse at why the Packers traded up to draft him in the first round. For him to say that is kind of scary to me. Now, they note that his accuracy is a big problem. So I went back to Jordan Love's career in college because, I'm going to be honest, I didn't watch Utah State. I had no idea really who Jordan Love was. I'd heard the name, but other than that, I hadn't seen anything. So I went and I looked at his college seasons. He played 3 years there. Here were his completion percentages every single year. 54.9, 64, 61.9. Now keep in mind, the 64% year was his big year. That was the year that everyone was like, oh, who's this Jordan Love kid? And then he lost a lot of players to the draft. There was a lot of turnover with the team. And his second year, or I guess his third year, it just wasn't as good. And then he came out, and there were all the talking about how, like, oh, well, he didn't look the same. His interceptions went up, his touchdowns went down, the yards went down. I mean, everything went in the wrong direction. But there's those that point to just the influx of talent on the team. And they note that accuracy isn't something that necessarily gets better once you get to the second level. Once you get to the NFL, those windows that you think are open that you try to throw, now that's a pick. And maybe it's even a pick six. You think that window's open, and then there's a hand on the ball and it's getting knocked down out of the air. You think that this window's open, but then you realize you threw it behind the receiver. The game only gets quicker. Your accuracy doesn't really just improve. And I'm going to give you guys an example. Josh Allen, while he played at Wyoming, he played 2 seasons there as the starter. Here were his completion percentages both years. 56 and 56.3. Not great. He goes to the NFL. Here are his completion percentages for his first 2 years. 52.8, 58.8. His career completion percentage is, drumroll please, 56.3. His career high in college. Josh Allen, he kinda is who he is, and that's part of the reason why it is I've said I do not necessarily like him. Because his accuracy, well, sure, you can say it did improve in his second year. It's still 58%. 59 if you want to be nice and round up. It's still not good. And you know what quarterback has been routinely criticized for his completion percentage, but who was a star in the NFL, or at least at one point in time, was a star, was a superstar? Cam Newton. Cam Newton in college has 2 years as a starter. Both years, his completion percentages were 60.7 and then 66.1. So he was better, his best season was better than both Jordan Love and Josh Allen. He goes to the NFL. Cam Newton, his career completion percentage is 59.6. And so many people give him so much flack for his completion percentage, but I've always said, it's a part of his game. It's just a part of his game. You need to let him run. You need to let him play his game. And in 2018, it was his most accurate season as a starter. He completed 67.5% of his passes, and most people attribute it to Norv Turner and what he did for Cam when it came to the system, the play calling, everything. So, I would say this. Maybe, just maybe, the system itself, especially a system like the West Coast system, it can be a bit more favorable. It can help give your quarterback some easier throws, give him some easier completions, and then you hope that just in the off season and with more experience, they just figure out how to become more accurate. But it isn't something that you can just, like anyone can just get stronger. Anyone can just get more bulky. But not anyone can just all of a sudden overnight throw the ball more accurately. Lamar Jackson, his jump from his rookie year to his second year is night and day. His rookie year, everyone saw his accuracy problems. Overthrowing some easy passes, really missing some guys badly. But then obviously this past season, MVP, one of the most efficient passers in the NFL, his completion percentage shot up, and even though he still wasn't necessarily stretching the field, right? It wasn't a bombs away kind of offense. It was not Bruce Arians' offense. It wasn't even the air raid style that the Cardinals are playing with Kyler. But he worked on his passing. He made sure to hit his short throws. He did work on his deep ball because he was hitting guys downfield when last season he was just, not last season, when his rookie season he was just overthrowing the guys. It is something you can work on, but it is more difficult. But let me tell you why it is that this report really does concern me. So again, as they do label it, as Schneidman labels it, they traded up to draft him. And he hasn't given them if he hasn't even given them a single glimpse as to why it is they would trade up to draft him in the first round, that is concerning to me. When they drafted Jordan Love, they thought they were going to be getting almost kind of like a Patrick Mahomes style project, because this guy has all the arm talent in the world, and that is the one thing they have said they've seen from him in practice is the arm talent. The arm talent is there, it's visible. As soon as he throws the football, you can see what the kid could maybe end up becoming. But the problem is all the other stuff, and specifically with the accuracy, right? What is the point of the arm talent if you're not accurate with the football? You just have a good arm for nothing. And there's other guys out there who have been accused of having a good arm for nothing, or you're just tall for nothing. You have this speed for nothing. With Jordan Love, this guy's supposed to be the heir apparent. He's supposed to take over for the franchise. And I've seen some people say, and I think it might have been actually a person on the Packers, I don't quite remember, but some people saying that, hey, maybe if Aaron Rodgers keeps on playing and everything's going good, then maybe we'll have a Jordan Love as a trade piece. Maybe Jordan Love, they can go ahead and parlay him into another pick. Well, what a waste of a pick. What a waste of a first round pick in a draft that was so receiver heavy. In a draft that was supposed to have the best receiving class ever. And I think, this upcoming draft, it's supposed to be even better. I think, and speaking of receivers, I think, was it Jamar Chase? He opted out of the college football season, so he's just going to start preparing for the NFL draft, and he's supposed to be maybe arguably the first receiver taken off the board, the LSU star. But in the case of Jordan Love, dude's supposed to take over for Aaron Rodgers. This was a year that they could have tried to double down on what they did last year. Remember, the Packers were 13-3 last year, and while I don't think they were a good 13-3, I thought they were a very rocky 13-3, and there were certain teams, primarily the 49ers, that they just did not match up with. They didn't even look competitive. I'm kind of ashamed that the Seahawks actually lost to them in the playoffs, because I didn't think it should have happened. I thought Seattle, especially given what we then saw from the Packers the following game against the Niners, I sat back and just kind of threw my arms up in the air and I said, how did the Seahawks lose this game exactly? How? How on earth? How did they even allow it? My goodness. It was just terrible. But you would think, being 13-3 with a rookie head coach, you're now going into another year of Rodgers and LaFleur. Rodgers should only understand LaFleur's system even better. LaFleur should have only a better idea of what it's like to work with Aaron Rodgers and understand what it is that he likes. But it seems like the Packers did everything in their power to not surround. It almost seems like they kind of set up Aaron Rodgers to fail. You don't draft him a receiver. You instead draft a running back, A.J. Dillon, who, if anything, is more like Leonard Fournette, an old school running back who doesn't really fit today's game anymore. Not really a pass catcher, more of a power back. They already had Williams and Jones. By all accounts, they're going to keep Jones, probably going to cut Williams, and they're going to keep Dillon to be a 1-2 punch there. But then when it comes to receiver, and I have talked about this before, it's Devontae Adams or bust. And I know that Pro Football Focus, they have talked about their number 2 receiver, who should be Allen Lazard, and that he is one of the best receivers and has been graded as one of the best receivers when it comes to getting covered one-on-one. So maybe Allen Lazard can emerge as a true number 2 receiver, and he can take advantage of Devontae Adams getting double-teamed. Maybe he can do it. But until then, by all accounts, it is Devontae Adams, and that's it. The offensive line is only getting worse. They lost Bulaga, their right tackle, who was arguably, especially this last season, their second best offensive lineman behind Bakhtiari. And the thing with Bulaga was just that he couldn't stay healthy. And when he wasn't on the field, there was a noticeable difference. It's just so strange how the Packers have treated Aaron Rodgers. It's so strange. Some people have even related it to Brett Favre's situation. Brett Favre, he still had a lot of football left in him. The problem was, at least for him, he kept talking about how he might retire, and they eventually were like, all right, well, we're going to go ahead and draft a guy. And then, of course, Favre, even when they drafted Aaron Rodgers, he still kind of said, maybe I'll retire, maybe I won't, to the point where eventually they went ahead and made Aaron Rodgers the starter. In the situation right now, Aaron Rodgers, he hasn't mulled retirement. He's only said he wants to play, and he has talked about how he wants to play into his 40s like Tom Brady because he feels good, he feels like he can keep doing it, and while his play has not necessarily shown it, and I've said I think that is part of the reason why they drafted Jordan Love is because Aaron Rodgers' play and his health has not been the same over these past few seasons. I still feel like, man, Aaron Rodgers, he stayed upright all year last year. While he didn't look the same, part of it, you could maybe say, is because of his surrounding pieces. Maybe if you gave him a young, inexpensive wide receiver at the bottom of the first round or in the second round or something, maybe you'd be in a better position. But the Packers have seemed to kind of forego that, and they are more worried about the future of the team than right now, and it's very strange. Aaron Rodgers is what now? 37? 36? One of the two? I think 36, maybe. But, I mean, he's closer to the end of his career than the beginning. You would think that the Packers would take this as an opportunity to give him as much help as possible so that they can, do something this season. I've already said before, I feel like the teams that are going to have the most success are the teams that had the least amount of turnover. The Packers didn't have too much turnover on their team, and they have the same head coach and the same quarterback. You would believe this should be a team that could take advantage of this season. But I feel like the Packers have really done him a disservice. And again, there's those that believe the fact that the Packers have only won one Super Bowl with this guy, the fact that they've only been to one Super Bowl with this guy, there's those that believe it is a failure. And I'm one of those people. And with the way it seems like they're trying to push Aaron Rodgers out the back door to me. And with the fact that Jordan Love apparently doesn't look good and doesn't look as good as advertised so far, that makes me think about Aaron Rodgers. And it makes me think, how does Aaron Rodgers feel about this? Because Aaron Rodgers, he's watching them in practice. All the quarterbacks, they practice together. He sees what Jordan Love's doing. He's probably sitting back going, man, we could have had this guy, we could have had this guy, we could have had this guy. Now, he's not saying it to anybody. He's probably just saying this, behind the scenes to himself, maybe to his to his friends or whatever. Probably just to himself. But he's probably got to be sitting there thinking, man, we could have had this receiver, we could have had that guy, we could have had that guy. But they chose a quarterback. And he isn't even close to beating me out. Jordan Love, according to this article, he's not even beating out their backup. And I don't even remember who the backup's name is. It was a guy I've never heard of. I didn't even know he existed. Jordan Love can't even beat out the backup I haven't heard of. How is he supposed to beat out Aaron Rodgers? If he can't beat out the backup now, is he supposed to all of a sudden this next year just explode and be ready to take the starting job? I don't know. I think this is shaping up to be more like one of the predictions I had, which is that the Packers will keep Aaron Rodgers for this year and next year, and then they will look to trade him, because I think at that point in time is when either the guaranteed money is at its lowest or it's completely gone, so they won't suffer like a major cap hit or anything like that. But then at that point, it's going to be who wants to trade for a 38-year-old quarterback, what will they do about that situation? Look, Aaron Rodgers said, when they drafted Jordan Love, what do you have? I think he said 4 fingers of tequila is what he called it. He said he knew it was going to be one of those nights. He's got to be looking at this situation, just going, we could have maximized this year. We could have maximized the next 2-3 years. We could have drafted a stud receiver. We could have really helped me out. But you guys were more concerned about the future rather than winning right now. And I think in the long run, especially if Jordan Love, if it turns out that after like 3 seasons of sitting on the bench, this dude still isn't ready to play, his accuracy is still that big of a problem, if he still isn't giving them a single glimpse as to why they traded up to draft him, talk about a bust of a first round pick. Even though it was a late first round pick, talk about a bust of a first round pick. Anyways, coming up next, I want to get into some Pete Carroll, and then coming up later, my final topic of the day, I want to get into the Jags, because I think that the Jags are doing the NFL version of tanking, and I do not believe it is going to work out for them the way that they want it to in the long run. That coming later, stay tuned.
Check out the show that's built on the MMA. From the UFC to extreme cage fighting, they got the fights covered. Check out the GSMC MMA podcast. Get the latest news on past or upcoming fights. Join us as we talk to and about some of the biggest names in the MMA, past, present, and future. When it's the fight game, there's just one show to check out. GSMCpodcast.com/MMA-podcast. Don't forget to like them on Facebook and follow them on Twitter. Visit GSMCpodcast.com for more info.
Welcome back to the GSMC Football Podcast. Last segment talked a little bit about Jordan Love and his situation with the Packers going on right now. Apparently, he doesn't look as impressive as a Matt Schneidman has said. One of the Packers beat reporters said that, and I quote, "Love has yet to even provide a glimpse at why the Packers traded up to draft him in the first round." That is not a glowing report. That's not what you want to hear, especially when it comes to a guy who's supposed to be, the heir apparent to Aaron Rodgers. That is why they drafted the guy. They didn't draft him to just be a franchise backup. They didn't draft him to just be a high-level backup. They drafted him to one day take over. They thought he could be like a Patrick Mahomes. That was his comp. A lot of guys said he looks like Patrick Mahomes. He has the arm talent. They were both a bit rigid in college. They had some things to work on, but they could translate. And while I don't think that's a very fair comparison, because Patrick Mahomes is probably outside of a guy like Aaron Rodgers, a guy like Russell Wilson when it comes to just sheer talent, Patrick Mahomes is probably, he's up there in the conversation for just top 5 talents all time at the quarterback position. What that dude can do, throwing to his left, to his right, running left, running right, across his body, no look, he's incredible. So I think it was a bit unfair to try and compare Jordan Love to that. Maybe the Packers got a bit too into the hype. I have no idea. But so far, Love has not looked good, and I think that is something the Packers should be concerned about. Anyways, to move to another NFC team, the Seattle Seahawks. So, I have been very, very outspoken when it comes to Pete Carroll. I have quite a few problems with Pete Carroll, and it mainly has to do with coach speak. Every single coach out there needs to get good at coach speak. It's kind of the same thing when it comes to being a franchise quarterback. You need to get good at saying the right thing. Guys like Andrew Luck embodied saying the right thing all the time. Russell Wilson embodied saying the right thing all the time. Guys like Aaron Rodgers didn't always. Sometimes he called out players publicly. While he might not name the player specifically, I remember there was one time where he said, he was talking about their rookie receivers, and he said, the guys need to work harder. So far, I'm not really seeing the effort. So far, it doesn't look like guys are really practicing hard enough. He kind of called them out publicly. Not many people like that. Some people do. Just kind of depends on what kind of a sports fan you are. But most people would say that's not the way you should go about it. Whereas Russell Wilson, it's after every single game. All the credit goes to all of his teammates, whereas he takes all the blame. Same thing with Andrew Luck. Same thing with Tom Brady, so on and so forth. There's many other quarterbacks that have done the same thing. When it comes to coach speak is like when, you're asking the coach, what's going on with the quarterback competition? And the coach says, well, both the guys are performing really, really well. I don't want to name a starter right now. We're going to let it play out. And, as the season gets nearer, I'll try and narrow it down. Eventually we'll pick a starter. But right now I just don't have a guy, that I really like. Even if we know one guy is running away with the job and the other guy, for lack of a better word, sucks. That's coach speak. And Pete Carroll is one of those guys who has really, really embodied and embraced coach speak, especially when it comes to Colin Kaepernick and the Black Lives Matter protest. Now, when George Floyd was murdered, And Pete Carroll, or I guess every single NFL head coach, really, every team, the commissioner, everyone, players all around the league, were getting asked about police brutality, Colin Kaepernick, and everyone was making these statements. You had these people coming out admitting that they were wrong. These teams were coming out saying they will support their players if they choose to kneel. A head coach of the Chargers, Anthony Lynn, said that Colin Kaepernick was on their workout list, but obviously at the moment they just couldn't work anyone out. When it came to Pete Carroll was asked about it because when Colin Kaepernick was originally out of the league a few years ago, Seattle was the only team to actually bring Colin Kaepernick in for a quote workout. Really what it was just a meeting where they just kind of talked about life and they asked him kind of where he was and what he was doing with his life, what he was doing with his activism, all this stuff. They didn't even ask him to throw a football. And at the end of the meeting, Pete Carroll came out and he said that Colin Kaepernick deserves to be a starter. And that, at the moment they weren't looking to sign him. And I think that season, Austin Davis was their backup. And if you don't know who Austin Davis is, I don't blame you. Now this season, Seattle's backup is once again Geno Smith. He was the backup last year. Geno Smith is a very nice man. I would vote for him. If he was running for office somewhere, I'd probably go ahead and vote for him. He's a very, very nice man, well-spoken, great dude. I don't really want to see him throwing the football. I've seen that before with the Jets, and even though I don't believe he got the fairest of shots with the Jets, I still just don't want to see that. I've seen it. It's not great. It's not the best in the world. And while I don't think he's terrible, he's not Russell Wilson. He is not, like Mahomes. He's not Rodgers. I don't even think he's Colin Kaepernick. When I originally saw that Seattle was bringing in Colin Kaepernick for a quote workout, I was excited because I thought, oh sweet, alright, now we're not Russell or bust. Because, let's be honest, if Seattle was to lose Russell Wilson, they're done. If Russell Wilson was out for like 5 games, Seattle, I'm telling you, they will lose all 5 of those games. There's no way they'd win it. It would almost be like the Peyton Manning effect. Remember when the Colts, they ended up drafting Andrew Luck the season before Peyton Manning got hurt? It showed exactly how bad that Colts roster was. They couldn't win a game without Peyton Manning. Peyton Manning carried that football team to every way, because they just didn't have the talent. Peyton Manning was uplifting everything. I think it's the same thing with Seattle. Russell Wilson is uplifting all of that talent, and if he goes away, Pete Carroll, I essentially think, would be exposed. The talent on the team would be exposed. And while I still think that, Lockett's good, I like Lockett, I like Greg Olsen, I like DK Metcalf, I like Chris Carson, I like some of the guys on the team, I think they're good players in themselves, but their defense is not nearly good enough anymore, their offensive line is not nearly good enough anymore, Russell Wilson makes those things better, and if they lost him, it would cripple the team. So as you can imagine, I was very, very excited to see all the reports talking about all these teams that are supposedly interested in him and they're just kind of waiting for a chance to work him out, yada, yada, yada. And now, of course, as I kind of said in a recent podcast, I feel like that has kind of gone away. I just don't feel like Kaepernick is going to get back in the league. I truly don't. It seems like teams are finding whatever excuse possible to not bring him in, and I think it's a bummer, and I think it's wrong, and I think it's sad, but it's just the way that things kind of are. But Pete Carroll, a couple of days ago, he had a media session, and he was talking about race. And he made some very, very nice comments. He says, and I don't mean to say that and sound like I'm being condescending. I mean, he did say some great things. I don't want to make it sound like I think that he was being sarcastic or not meaning what he says, but I do want to challenge him on some of the things that he said. And I'm going to read a little bit of this article. The Daily Mail, they did a walkthrough of his press conference, talked about some of the things that he said, gave some quotes. I'm going to read a little bit of this article to you, and I'm going to kind of respond to it. So, they start off. The Super Bowl winning coach of the Seattle Seahawks has delivered an impassioned call for the end of racism in the United States, urging his fellow coaches and players to speak out and use their platform for good. Pete Carroll told a press conference on Saturday that a change in attitudes was long overdue in denouncing a system of slavery which has never gone away. And he said white people need to be educated about what the heck is going on in the world. He said the team has decided earlier that morning to cancel practice and to all register to vote instead. Let's step up, he said. No more being quiet. No more being afraid to talk to topics. No more, I might lose my job over this because I've taken a stand here. Screw it. Carroll, who coached the New York Jets, San Francisco 49ers, and New England Patriots before joining the Seahawks in 2010, said this season had an urgency to it like he'd never felt before in his 50 years of coaching. I want to talk to you guys about some stuff that's on my heart, he said, beginning his 15-minute speech. Now, I'm not going to read the rest of the article. If you would like to see more of his speech, if you'd like to read it yourself, you guys can go ahead and look it up. You can find it anywhere. You can even find it on a different site other than what I went to, which was the Daily Mail. But he went on to talk about how he thought that America had been taught a false history of their country. He talked about the settlers, talked about how slavery came about, talked about how it never gone away, talked about how he thought people need to go out there and vote, whether you're black, brown, or whatever, you need to go out and vote. That to not vote is just not acceptable anymore. If you want change, you need to vote. And multiple Seahawks teammates came out and backed this up. I think Geno Smith and Jamal Adams, a lot of guys came out and said that, that's my head coach. I know, of course, the Ravens, they came out with their strong, passionate statement. Everyone was saying that these are our Ravens. It's not just Baltimore Ravens. They're our Ravens. And there's those out there who, of course, were just sickened by the statement and they hated every bit of it. Again, just very, very divisive times. I don't think Pete Carroll said anything wrong. But I want to challenge him. Pete, if you've had a awakening and you feel a sense of urgency with this season that you've never felt before, you said a lot of great things. And again, a lot of them are true. And again, I do not want to sound like I'm being condescending. I'm not trying to be. But what I am saying is that if you're telling the truth with the way that you feel, and that you feel like there's all these problems that America hasn't that America hasn't addressed, that Kaepernick was right, that the players who were protesting were right, that all these things were worth fighting for. If you believe that, sign Kaepernick. If you truly believe that everyone who was protesting was right, and that Kaepernick was right in his original stance, sign Kaepernick. Not too long ago, and I think you've said it on more than one occasion, you said Kaepernick is good enough to be a starter. And that he was, he did not deserve to be a backup. He deserved to be a starter in the league. Well, he's not getting a starting job, Pete, and you know that. You are aware enough to know he is not getting a starting job on any team. What better place for Colin Kaepernick to be the backup for than Seattle? Remember, Seattle, Richard Sherman, Earl Thomas, Michael Bennett, a lot of the leaders on that defense, they were clamoring for Seattle to go and sign Colin Kaepernick. Now, a lot of these players are no longer on the Seahawks. Michael Bennett was traded, Sherman was cut, Earl is gone, Chancellor retired. It's only Bobby Wagner left. Cliff Averill, he retired as well. And there were the reports that were coming out saying that Seattle was actually getting rid of some of these players, or they got rid of Sherman, they got rid of Bennett, they were trying to get rid of some of these guys because of how outspoken they were being, and they thought that was kind of negatively impacting the team. They almost kind of seemed to become anti-Russell Wilson because they thought Pete was playing favorite to Russell Wilson. There was just a whole mess that came out. But either way, the point still stands. Pete, at one point in time you said Kaepernick is good enough to be a starter. I feel like Pete should know, even if they're comfortable with Geno, right? And why would they be comfortable with Geno? Because he is literally no threat to Russell Wilson. And while I don't believe Colin Kaepernick would be a threat either, he would at least be a more credible threat than Geno Smith. I don't think they need to make Colin Kaepernick the starter. I don't think there'd be any pressure. I don't think anybody would be clamoring for him to start over Russell Wilson, especially given the pub Russell Wilson has received this offseason, being voted number 2 on the NFL's top 100 players list, being at least in the Madden game for the first time ever in his career, the newest Madden, being the second highest rated quarterback in the game, only behind Patrick Mahomes. I mean, Russell Wilson, he would be the no doubt unquestioned starter. Signing a guy who, there's another team out there in the NFL right now who signed a guy who's good enough to be a starter. The Cowboys. They signed Andy Dalton. 1-year deal. Gave him a good chunk of money to be the backup. He probably won't see the field. But you know why they signed him there? Because they wanted a good backup. And there's always that thing. It was always that thing. Just in case Dak didn't play, just in case there was a little bit of a controversy with the contract. What if? Well, he's gonna play. But now they have a really good backup. So in the event that Dak Prescott finally actually gets hurt, they have a good backup to go to. Seattle, if Russell Wilson gets hurt, they're done. They had that one injury scare. I remember when they opened the season against Miami. I think it was in 2016 or 2017. They opened the game against Miami. Russell Wilson got his ankle stepped on, and I thought for sure his ankle broke. I saw the way it bent. I was terrified. Luckily, he was okay. He was able to finish the season, but he did kind of, finish it limping, so to speak. I don't know. Common sense to me says any team that signs Colin Kaepernick will get a gigantic PR boost. They are going to look amazing. That will be America's team. Whichever team signs Colin Kaepernick, that will be America's team. Everyone is going to want to see how that situation unfolds. And heaven forbid, my goodness, if Colin Kaepernick actually somehow manages to see the field, that will be the highest rated game in the NFL. It could probably be against the Bengals. And it'd be the highest rated game in the NFL. Because everyone would want to see, what does Colin Kaepernick look like? Okay, maybe not. Maybe I'm embellishing a little bit. But you know what I mean. People would be excited to see it. I don't think there's a downside to signing Kaepernick anymore. Teams have made it pretty clear. The commissioner has made it pretty clear. They don't care for what Donald Trump has to say anymore. If he wants to be anti the players kneeling and he wants to call them SOBs, then so be it. But the players were right. Their concern is real. It's valid, and they're going to support the players on it. I just don't think there's a downside to signing Colin Kaepernick. And I think a team like Seattle that really is a quarterback injury away from having a top 5 pick, I think they would really benefit from having a guy who's played in the Super Bowl, was a play away from winning the Super Bowl, a guy who, really I think you could say was almost kind of ahead of his time when he was playing in the NFL, because the NFL nowadays fits more the Colin Kaepernick style. Back then, no, they were still looking for Peyton Mannings. They were still looking for Brady's. They were still looking for Eli Mannings, at least from the standpoint of looking for pocket passers. Colin Kaepernick was different from that. And he showed how he could dominate NFL games using his legs and his arm. Not the most accurate guy in the world, kind of like a Cam Newton. But his running ability, second to none. I just don't get it. Pete, if you really want to show everybody how woke you are now, even though I think everything he said is very valid. I think everything he said is correct. Again, I am not trying to be condescending. But if you want to show everyone exactly how woke you are, and how aware you are of all the issues, and how right the players were, sign Colin Kaepernick. That's all I gotta say on that. Anyways, coming up next, final topic of the day. The Jacksonville Jaguars are doing the NFL's version of tanking. And I think I know why they're doing it. And I do not believe it's going to work out in their favor. That coming up Next, final topic of the day. Thank you for tuning in.
Check out the show built around the women of MMA. From the UFC to the extreme cage fighting, we got the fights covered.
Listen.
It's the Golden State Media Concepts Women's MMA Podcast. The latest news of upcoming fights, discussions of previous matches. Join us as we talk to and about the biggest names in women's mixed martial arts. Past, present, and future. When it's the women's fight game, you know where to listen to. The Golden State Media Concepts Women's MMA Podcast.
Welcome back to the GSMC Football Podcast, final segment of the day. Last segment, I issued a challenge to Pete Carroll. I want Pete Carroll to double and triple down on his statements about Black Lives Matter and about players being right and about Colin Kaepernick being right, yada, yada, yada. I want him to double and triple down on those statements and sign Colin Kaepernick. He has the power. If Pete Carroll wants Colin Kaepernick on the team, he can get him on the team. He has been given that power with the team. When it comes to drafting, signing players, he has that power. Maybe for better, maybe for worse. At times, it seems to be kind of for worse, especially given some of these draft picks, some of these first round picks in recent memory. But I am issuing a challenge to Pete Carroll. I think that he believes everything he's saying, and he's saying great things. Again, I do not mean to sound condescending. He's putting out great messages that are very true. I just want him to take it to that next level, right his wrong, and sign Kaepernick. But anyways, final topic of the day. So, the Jaguars. I have talked about the Jaguars off and on in my podcast, and one of the things that I have said is that I didn't understand why it is that the Jaguars were projected to be so terrible. I knew that their defense had lost a lot of pieces. I could understand that their defense probably wasn't going to be that good, but offensively, I like their offensive line. They have a guard in the center I really like, and I like Cam Robinson, their tackle. The rest of the offensive line performs relatively, decent. They're a good unit together. I thought Leonard Fournette was coming off of his best year. He looked the best that he had. Gardner Minshew looked like a bright spot and looked like a quarterback that they could really build around if they embraced him. DJ Chark emerged as a potential number 1, number 2 receiver. D.D. Westbrook is there, and I like him. I just thought the team had some good bright spots to look to, but a lot of predictions had the Jags finishing with the number 1 overall pick, the number 2, finishing with the worst record in the league, or tied for the worst record in the league, and I just didn't quite understand it. I'm now thinking I see what is going on here. So the Jaguars, they have recently made some moves. So number 1, they went ahead and they finally traded Yannick Ngakoue. I think the day after I released my last podcast, they traded Yannick Ngakoue. About time. I'm glad they traded him. What's funny about the trade is that they traded him for, I think, a second in a fifth, maybe, if I'm remembering the trade correctly. They got nothing. They got nothing good for him. Now, granted, they did spend the 3rd round pick on him, so I guess technically they did upgrade and get a 2nd round pick in exchange for him. But I thought they could have done a lot better. I thought they could have gotten more for him, and I saw, they were saying they were waiting for a good deal, they were waiting for a trade worth his caliber player. The fact that I saw reports saying there was a team that offered a 1st round pick and a Pro Bowl player in exchange for Yannick Ngakoue, and they apparently turned it down, and then the Vikings give up a 2nd and get him, I don't really know how I feel about that. I guess there's always the chance that the report was false and that it never actually happened, or maybe this is just their way of NFL tanking. I really have no idea. And then I guess you look at Leonard Fournette, they went ahead and they cut him. In a quote from head coach Doug Marrone on trying to trade Leonard Fournette. He was quoted in saying, "We couldn't get anything. A fifth, a sixth, anything. We couldn't get anything." And I'm not going to say that I'm surprised. Leonard Fournette is a bit of a throwback running back. There's only one other running back in the NFL off the top of my head that I can think of that is still kind of an old school running back, and it's Jordan Howard. Everyone else has some kind of ability to catch the football. I guess Chris Carson. Chris Carson also kind of a bit more of an old school throwback running back, though I think he has shown that he's at least decent in the pass catching game. But you look at the higher paid guys, the guys who are really getting the money or who have gotten the money in the past, it's guys like Christian McCaffrey, a guy like Todd Gurley, Devontae Freeman, Joe Mixon now, Alvin Kamara, obviously now he's up for a contract extension, Austin Eckler. These are the guys who are getting the deals because they are dual threat running backs and they're elite at both. To be an old school running back nowadays, it just doesn't really bode well. You are essentially like a 2-down player. You're a short yardage player. You are not worth the 4th overall pick that the Jacksonville Jaguars traded for him, or not traded for him, but that they used to select him. And it's kind of funny. They point out that, they took him. He was the first running back taken in that 2017 draft. Here were some of the other running backs taken after him: Christian McCaffrey, Dalvin Cook, Joe Mixon, Alvin Kamara, Kareem Hunt, James Conner, Tariq Cohen, Marlon Mack, Aaron Jones, Chris Carson, and then of course, Austin Eckler, who was undrafted. Chris Carson, so far right now, I mean, he's like the franchise back for the Seattle Seahawks. He was picked 249th. Aaron Jones got a big extension from the Packers. He was 182nd. Kareem Hunt, who was picked by the Chiefs, now obviously playing with the Browns after his incident, he was 86th. Alvin Kamara was 67th. McCaffrey was 8th. Leonard Fournette went 4 picks ahead of McCaffrey. All of those other running backs, except for maybe Chris Carson, have shown an ability to catch the football and catch it at an elite level, to be able to split out wide, to take advantage of linebackers and safeties. That is what the other running backs have done. The Jaguars did that in 2017. Now, what's really funny about this Jags team, and Warren Sharp and Field Yates both had a set of tweets on the day that they cut Leonard Fournette that I thought was very interesting. So Warren Sharp, who is a guy I use a lot for analytics and football, I love Warren Sharp. If you haven't if you have a Twitter account, I would suggest following him at Sharp Football. He's great. Here is the Jags record since 2011. So here's the record every single year: 5-11, 2-14, 4-12, 3-13, 5-11, 3-13. 2017, they went 10-6. That year, they had a 10-point lead in the second half of the AFC Championship game against the Patriots, thanks mainly, and I guess not mainly, thanks to their number one defense. And then 2018, they were 5-11, and last year they were 6-10. If you look at that defense, and look at the players that are gone now, you look at the players in general from that team that are gone now: Yannick Ngakoue, Jalen Ramsey, AJ Boye, Dante Fowler, Marcel Darius, who else was it? Aaron Colvin, who was a corner, Deshaun Gibson, Barry Church, Telvin Smith. They ended up, who was it? Malik Jackson, Calais Campbell. And then you look obviously on offense, Blake Bortles is gone. Allen Robinson is gone. Allen Hurns is gone. Now Leonard Fournette is gone. This team, since in 2 seasons, they fell apart. In 2 seasons, the team is completely different. They are inept. And that is kind of how Warren Sharp ended his tweet. He just said inept. They had a chance. 2017, that was their one shot to go to the Super Bowl. That was the one year that Jags fans, in recent memory, have had to really cheer for their team and look forward to something. And the following year, they completely crumbled. Last year, they were trying to do the Nick Foles experiment. Foles got hurt. Minshew came in. Minshew actually looked pretty good, but the team just wasn't talented enough. They traded away Ramsey. They traded away Boye. They traded away all their players. And I think that it is because they are doing an NFL version of tanking for Trevor Lawrence, or Justin Fields, and I think they're going to be targeting Trevor Lawrence. Field Yates, he said in 2017, the Jags defense ranked second in points, second in total yards, first pass defense, second in takeaways, second in interceptions, second in sacks, and then of course, they were 9 minutes away from the Super Bowl. 12 of their 14 snap leaders were gone from that defense. So, it just goes to show this team doesn't know how to keep their players. This team doesn't even really know how to win. Since 2011, they've had one winning season. This is why there was talk about this team maybe being the first team that's moved out of America. This is why this team was once again going to go play in London, I believe, because they don't get great attendance in Jacksonville. The fans really have nothing to cheer for. They need to rely on fans from other countries to go and attend their games. It is ridiculous. And I think this team is planning to tank for Trevor Lawrence. So I think what that basically means is that Gardner Minshew, he's kind of going to be thrown out there to the wolves. I have no idea who their other running back is. I know who their receivers are. I know their offensive line is going to be there. I know who their tight end is. But I have no idea what they're going to do at running back. Maybe they could actually upgrade, though. I think any running back would kind of be better than Leonard Fournette at this point. Anyone that can catch, at least, would be probably a better option than Leonard Fournette. And I don't mean that to sound mean to Leonard Fournette, but it's just kind of the way that the NFL is at this point. I just don't think this is going to work. And I don't think it's going to work for mainly what I have already listed. Since 2011, they have had one winning season, and it was 10-6. They did it with Blake Bortles and the number one defense in the NFL. They stocked up on all that defense, and they were really trying to make Blake Bortles work. Blake Bortles, I think I've ever said, I think he's a better passer than like Josh Allen. I think he proved that. But when it comes to all quarterbacks in the NFL, he is still one of the worst in the game. He was a turnover machine. Even in his one breakout year where he threw like 35 touchdown passes, he still had, I think, like 18 interceptions that year. And then he was never able to recapture that form. He went back to either overthrowing guys, just missing guys wild. There's a lot of people who think he should not have come out of college when he did. And what's really crazy about that draft as well, when they drafted Leonard Fournette, they passed up drafting, obviously, they could have drafted McCaffrey, but not only did they pass up drafting McCaffrey, there's two names I want to bring up. Deshaun Watson, Patrick Mahomes. And they passed up on those guys because they had Blake Bortles and they wanted to make him work. What a mistake that was. Can you imagine if Bill O'Brien, who for whatever reason is considered to be the worst head coach in football, if he's getting this out of Deshaun Watson, can you imagine what Doug Marrone with the Jags could have gotten out of Deshaun Watson? Can you imagine what his playmaking would have done for that defense? Oh my God. I would have probably taken the Jags to go to the Super Bowl. I would have taken Deshaun Watson to probably be the first rookie quarterback to ever win a Super Bowl. Because if they did that with Bortles, what could they have done with Watson? Because Watson, since he stepped into the NFL day one, he has been electric. He's been a playmaker. He's been fantastic. Not the best quarterback in the world, but he's been outstanding. Now understand, I say all of this to say this. This team's history is not good. This is not a winning franchise. This team can't keep their players. This team doesn't particularly always seem to draft well. And then even when they do draft well, they still don't keep the players. If they are trying to do the NFL's version of tanking for Trevor Lawrence, then I hate to be the bearer of bad news, but I do not think it's going to work. I really don't. I don't think this is going to go in the direction that they would like it to. And it's not because I think that Trevor Lawrence is going to be a bust. I don't think he's going to be a bust. I think that he can play, and I think that he'd be actually really good. But we all know a lot of it has to do with what franchise are you drafted to. If a team is picking number one overall, it's because they're not good. Maybe, or in the rare situation, it's because they had a quarterback injury and the backup just couldn't even tread water, and so they were just god awful. But most of the time, when a team has the number 1 overall pick, it's because they're bad. The Jets, they drafted Sam Darnold. Sam Darnold, in many people's eyes, was viewed to be a can't miss prospect. Have you seen Sam Darnold with the Jets? There are barely times where he looks like an NFL quarterback. He has some flashes, he has some moments, but all in all, the Jets have not surrounded him with anything. And Sam Darnold, at the moment you would say, maybe isn't a bust, but is on the verge of being considered one, cause he has not saved the Jets. The Jets are not any better than they have been in recent memory. Sam Darnold is really just kind of another quarterback with the Jets. Baker Mayfield, his rookie year, he looked good. His second year looked awful. And he's already on his 4th head coach. That's the Browns for you. And there's people out there that believe that the Browns are going to do to Baker what they've done with every other quarterback that they seem to draft. You look at Josh Rosen, he goes to the Cardinals. They gave up on him after 1 season. This stuff happens everywhere. It happens everywhere. Buffalo seems to have been the best situation out of all the teams. And I think that's kind of surprising. But it seems to have been the best situation out of all the teams because Buffalo is surrounding Josh Allen with great pieces. They have a good head coach in Sean McDermott. That seems to be the best place out of all the places that the quarterbacks got drafted. We will wait and see what happens this coming season, see what Stefanski does with Baker Mayfield, so on and so forth. But where you get drafted matters. You need to be in a good place where you can be surrounded by talent. And if not talent, at least a place that has a good culture, that has a good head coach. Something. What on earth do the Jaguars have? I will say it again. I've been really staunch on Marcus Mariota. I think Marcus Mariota can play if a team just embraces his play style. When it comes to Gardner Minshew, is he the most accurate quarterback in the world in his rookie year? No. But you know what he was? He was the highest graded rookie quarterback in the NFL last year. He was better than Kyler. He was better than Daniel Jones. And for whatever reason, those guys still get talked about more than Gardner Minshew. I don't know exactly why. I thought Minshew looked pretty good. I think that they would actually have a real chance that Minshew could potentially be a franchise quarterback if they would just build around him. And it doesn't seem like they're going to do that. And if they are, they have a really, really interesting way of doing so. I think that after the season, they're probably going to fire Doug Marrone. I don't know if they're going to look to trade Gardner Minshew. Maybe they keep him on as a backup. But assuming that they do get a top pick in this NFL draft, and assuming they actually do have a chance to draft Trevor Lawrence, I think what's going to end up happening is they're going to sign a head coach that really likes him. They might try and get one away from a college team or something like that. But I think they're going to grab a guy who loves Trevor Lawrence. They're going to try and pair him probably with an offensive-minded coach because that's where a lot of teams like to go, even though I don't think that the defensive-minded head coach is necessarily bad. And I think they're going to try and restart this thing. I think that they're going to try and do a full reboot. But given the history of the team, you know what they say, a fish rots from the head down, right? There's only so many times that the Browns can replace their head coach before you have to look at the front office. There's only so many times that the Jets can replace their head coach before you have to look at the front office. There's only so many times that the New York Knicks can replace their head coach before you have to look at that owner Dolan and tell him to sell the team. But don't tell him to sell the team while you're at the game because then he might kick you out of the stadium. When it comes to the Jags, I've heard great things about Khan, and I know there's a lot of people that really like Khan because he's one of the few minority owners in the NFL, but maybe he just isn't a good owner of the team. Maybe it's just not being ran well. Maybe they need a new president of football operations. I have no idea. But again, hold on, let me pull up their records again since 2011. 5-11, 2-14. 4-12, 3-13, 5-11, 3-13, 10-6, 5-11, 6-10. 6-10 is their record last year. That is their second best record since 2011. 6-10. This franchise is not good. And I think they're gonna try and draft Trevor Lawrence thinking he's gonna save them. They're gonna ask him to carry the team. They're gonna put him in harm's way. And it's just not gonna go well. Now maybe if they can keep their offensive line strong, and maybe, find a running back somewhere, lay the rounds or something, find some kind of a credible running back, obviously keep DJ Chark, maybe keep Westbrook if you can, but again, I don't know if these players are going to want to stay in this franchise. That's kind of I don't know why Joe Schobert went there. I know they offered him a good chunk of money. I almost don't know why he even bothered. Why would he go there? He's not going to win anything. Okay, but more to the point, let me stop just bashing him. I wish Trevor Lawrence the best for this coming NFL draft. Again, most teams seem to kind of have their franchise quarterback. You would assume so. The Browns kind of have their guy. The Bills seem to have their guy. The Jets seem to have their guy, and they're trying to make it work. Would they give up on them this quickly to go, if they somehow manage to get a top 5 pick, would they give up on them that quickly for a chance to get Trevor Lawrence or Justin Fields? Maybe. But it seems like the Jags, all fingers are pointing to the Jags, that they are going to be the team who is chasing after Trevor Lawrence. And again, while I like Trevor Lawrence as a prospect, and I think he can play in this league, I think he needs to go to the right team. When you have that kind of talent, you need a team that can properly support you, and I just don't think the Jags are that team. So I will just leave it at that. Whew. I cannot wait for football. I know I said at the beginning, I just can't wait. I'm so excited. A week and a half until the first game, finally. And then I guess we'll just see how the season goes. Hopefully there's no stoppage. Hopefully nothing goes terribly wrong. And hopefully we can conclude the football season with the Super Bowl. And I'm really looking forward to it. I really am. Thank God for sports. Thank God for sports. Anyways, thank you for tuning in to the GSMC Football Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Podcast Network. I would like to ask that you please remember to subscribe to the show and write a nice review. That really helps us out. Also, if you can, please follow us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. Thank you. And have a good night.
You've been listening to the Golden State Media Concepts Football Podcast, part of the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network. You can find this show and others like it at www.gsmcpodcast.com. Download our podcast on iTunes, Stitcher, SoundCloud, and Google Play. Just type in GSMC to find all the shows from the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network, from movies to music, from sports to entertainment, and even weird news. You can also follow us on Twitter and on Facebook. Thank you, and we hope you have enjoyed today's program.